Hey, Godwin, I'm so happy to have you on the Everything Saxophone podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Hey, Donna.
This is cool. So, you know what I forgot to mention? We were talking before. We have a mutual friend, Andy Farber,
Oh, the
and
Farber, also from Long Island, I believe, right?
that's right, Long Island. That's right. We got to put it all in one word, Long Island.
Right.
I've known Andy for a long time, and
Yeah.
I think you were playing alto on his latest release that's like out now. I think on Artist Share or something like that, called Early Blue Evening, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's a wonderful album. And he's such a great composer, arranger, amazing saxophonist, as you know, great historian too on the horn, where he's able to, speak a lot of different um, languages on the horn. And he follows the masters well, the language of the masters, and just overall a wonderful soul. Yeah.
That's awesome that you were a part of that project. And the funny thing that you said about that, he's an historian of the horn. Growing up, I knew him when we were like what 14 or 15. At that
Hmm.
time, this is so unbelievable. At that time, he knew so much. He blew my mind. Like we
Right.
listened to records and stuff like that, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, and this is the history behind this, and this is the history behind that." I'd be like, "Oh my God, you know so much. This is
Yeah.
crazy."
It's wow. Impressive. I believe it. Yeah, he's still like that. Yeah. Andy Farber. Ooh, shout out to Andy Farber.
Cool. Well, now shouting out to you. So, I want people to know who you are and, to get to know you better. So, I'm always curious about how people got started in music, how they got started on the saxophone, even if saxophone was your first instrument. So, talk to us a little bit about how you got started.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a very musical family. My father, who was a pastor, passed away 2 years ago.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, yesterday was my father's birthday. So
Oh,
shout out to him.
yeah. Yeah.
At the age of 5, our birthday gift is music.
Wow.
And so, as like for our birthday, literally, it's the piano. We get the what's the method book? I'm not gonna remember it. But he pulls out the piano, and we have our first lesson on piano. Starts with do re mi fa sol la ti do. He used the French method. My father was from Haiti, so we started with classical piano. Teaches us how to read. Well, first we start with solfege. Do re mi fa sol la si do, not ti, si do. The French method, and usually we do some ear training before he teaches us how to read, meaning like do re mi fa mi fa, like things like that. And from there we start reading music, and it's funny because I don't really remember the methods that he used, but it worked. It's like, okay, these are quarter notes, eighth note, and quarter note does this, and boom. And next thing you know, we're reading music and we're playing. So then and we were homeschooled. So I'm one of 5. I would say the first 3 were homeschool, and then after that, it's like whatever. Father gave up on his experiment. We called them. We used to refer to ourselves as his little experiment because he had a very specific goal and views of life and what he wanted out of us, his children. And I think for the most part it worked. So that was my introduction to music. And so then around, I guess at the age of 8, yes, at the age of 8, we moved to Haiti, which is where my parents are from. They wanted for us to connect to the culture. My father also had, or still have, actually, and am in charge of the school now. My father has a church in Haiti, a school, kindergarten to terminal. I always say there are 13 grades in Haiti, so it's kindergarten till grade 13, which is called philo for short, as in philosophy. It still follows like the French method of like the idea of bac bac de. Your French speakers will know this, or and so yeah, the radio station at the time, orphanage, what else? A medical clinic. My mother's family is in the medical field, and so that was, yeah. So then when we arrived to Haiti, I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me. He was already way more advanced than me on piano. And I said, Dad, I want to play the saxophone because I think that way we can have a band. Like my brother and I, we can play together. And then so when we moved down there, I wasn't really happy because I didn't speak the language well yet. And so we were encouraged to kind of like his way of getting us to really be happy about the move. Because I mean, Haiti, from Stamford, Connecticut to Haiti, we were living in Stamford at the time, is culture shock. And so then I was gifted the saxophone on October 10th, which is my saxophone anniversary. Wow. Ironically, it happens to be my parents' anniversary too, when they got married. So I started playing the saxophone. So then my first lesson was hot cross buns, but starting with the note D, D.
Yeah, all right, hold on. Okay, that's an interesting note to start on, okay.
So, the concert F, so that was the lesson. Not diatonically like but kind of getting used to that. And then my second lesson, I told them, well, I already know I've been playing piano for 2 years or 3 years. Is it possible for you to just teach me the chromatic scale and I'll just take it from there? And then he then put the teacher, the great maestro, Lutner Jean, who also passed away last year during the pandemic too. He didn't really like that because I took away from his, money. That's the weekly lesson. That's, and so he said, okay, fine, but I'll still give you lessons, get your embouchure correct. And I actually started again with the French system, which is double lip. I didn't start using my teeth until high school. I met a great mentor of mine by the name of Herb Wilson in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I was living there at the time, and he told me, yeah, you need to put your teeth on top of the mouthpiece. It's probably too late for you, but I was such like a naive kid. Like, no, I'm going to do it. What? That's a challenge. So I switched. I know a lot of people don't switch. But yeah, then I started, putting my teeth on top of the mouthpiece.
Oh, I gotta dive into that for a second. Hold on. So you started with double lip. What do you feel the difference was when you were playing double lip versus now, single lip, teeth on the mouthpiece?
Yeah, teeth on the mouthpiece. I think it's a clearer sound. It's a more focused sound, and it's more in tune. And it's a bigger sound too, because you can actually push more. That's what I noticed. However, on soprano, I would say now it's kind of like a looser thing on top of the mouth. It's not as tight as it used to be. It's kind of like a lot more loose. My embouchure is a lot more loose. I wouldn't say it's quite double, but it's kind of like very loose. And then I noticed that a lot of the guys that play double lip tend to kind of have maybe a smaller sound. I mean, it works. Some of my favorite players play double lip, but I think that's what it is. You kind of have more, it's more sound, a lot more focus, maybe a lot easier to control because of the focus of the air. I would say that's my opinion of that. And then when I switch also, all of a sudden I went up in reed size from maybe like 3 or something to about 4. I use 4.5 Boston sax reeds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are strong reeds.
more open. Yeah. But I think it's because of that, teeth on top kind of creates, more resistance. I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And do you know, a lot of people always ask about, oh, well, what's the difference between double lip and single lip? And, a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people do start off with double lip embouchure. And, I mean, to me, whatever works, works. I mean, I don't use double lip. It's very, for me, it's very uncomfortable. I play trumpet also. So,
Right.
it just, I feel like, I'm fine on oboe, but I just can't do that on a saxophone or a clarinet. So it intrigues me, and there's not a lot of people that do use double lip unless you've encountered a bunch of people.
Yeah, there's all of when I lived in New Orleans, it seems like all of those, I think Brentford Marsalis, Donna Harrison,
Oh, then I'm
a
wrong.
lot of those guys down there use double lip. They still
Wow.
use kind of French system of well, at least that's what we were told. It's the French system. I'm not sure in France if they have to ask one of my students if he actually plays double lip. I don't think he does. But yeah, that yeah. So I mean, Haiti, there's a lot of commonality between culturally and musically between Haiti and New Orleans. So that's another connection that a lot of the players in Haiti play double lip.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here too. So we're going to get to that, but I also want to dive back into how you were first taught, and you was first taught solfege and do re
Yeah,
mi fa sol la si do. Yeah, I know that because my trumpet teacher would make me sing everything in fixed do. Was it
right.
fixed do or movable do?
Oh yeah, fix do re mi la do la ti do re mi fa la ti la do fa mi la mi re mi di be do mi do. Yeah, so I still think of that even when I'm improvising. I'm always thinking like that. Do
Oh,
fa sol fa mi fa la la ti la sol fa sol la do mi sa mi fa sol la do mi e li sol do me di do la.
that's awesome. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, I still think very much like that. Every single note, no matter how abstract, it's all being solfeged up here, up there, through the horn. Yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
and that comes from your early experience. And I had Alexa Tarantino as a guest on the podcast,
She
and
does too, I see that, but I feel like maybe is she moving? She's using movable though, perhaps.
you know what? I don't remember. I think so. I think she does use movable dough. Yeah, I know in a lot of colleges they use movable dough. I know when I was at Queens College it was movable dough, and that was so hard for me because Vince was having me do fixed dough, and the thing is, it's not that you can't obtain perfect pitch. Let's say you can obtain relatively good pitch,
Mm-hmm.
relative pitch, I should say. And I know that was really hard, but I'm pretty sure she was on movable dough. And I remember I learned about her from other people, but also from seeing some of her videos where she would do the movable dough bebop lines with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes with Chad Elby, and it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. But this is awesome that you do the same thing. So when you're improvising, you're solfeging it.
I'm solfeging it 100%. 100%. However, the dough is my dough on the saxophone. That's the
Oh,
just to the dough of the sax. Like dough is dough. It's C. Dough is so like that. So that's but yeah.
when you okay, hold on. And you mostly play alto, right? Or do you mean do when like if you're an alto,
Yeah,
your do is C?
C, and if I'm on soprano, my do is C like that. That's which is the system that's used outside of here. When I'm teaching, outside of the US, it's always like that. Oh, do, re. And the other thing outside of the US too, which is really cool, I'm trying to introduce to in my programs in Haiti and elsewhere, is the notion that here we use the chromatic like do, di, re, re, mi, fa, fi, sol, si, la, li, ti, do. That's not really common there. We just sing if me is flat, you sing it, but you still say me.
Okay.
And fa, like we don't say fa, fi. So I can do both. I can do both now. But I feel like I might have rejected the chromatic one when I rejected a lot of things a few years ago. Like, okay, I'm gonna throw this away, that, and that's one of the things I threw away, the chromatic. I said I'm gonna just go back to my roots to me, if it's flat, you just sing it flat, but it's still me.
That is
Mhm.
so cool. That is so cool. And I didn't realize that. I'm trying to remember. I think it's a lot faster to not have all of those syllables. I'm just thinking, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Mhm.
but you have to have a very good sense of pitch and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Absolutely. I
But
think it does that. It then steal that notion of pitch recognition, and it totally enhance ear training. I'm a big, a firm believer in solfege for ear training. I think it just has all the pluses. I think people that do solfege tend to have kind of broader ears and can hear a lot of different things. It's funny because I'm teaching at Berklee, and that's one of the things that I see, that a lot of my students can use more of. Um, as because Berklee does, I mean, every school do like the jury, at the end of the semester where you have to play the different scales. And I remember at Berklee, I never practiced those because I would say, oh, melodic minor, so da 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 dee, da dee, da 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 dee, dee, da. And then if they say start on F, I just start on F and remember that. Boom. B flat. I know that sound is da 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 dee do. Harmonic minor da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee. So I'll play it like that. Okay, play your diminished whole tone. So da 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 dee da da dee da dee da da dee dee do do. So I know that's the sound. So I wouldn't have to practice it in different keys. If I know what it sounds like, I can play it in any key. Okay, play diminished, blah, 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 or, whatever it is. So that's how I learned. I never had to practice any of my scales. I just know the sound and to pick a starting note and do it. So that's part of my students' midterm assignment. I'm going to give you a starting note. Speak me a whole tone scale there. No, 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 no. And I think that will really help them. Not only student, but anyone, any walk, and whatever your musical experience, walk of life. I think that would really help because at the end of the day, when we're improvising as saxophonist, trumpeter, whatever instrument we play, it's really the ears that are at work, and it's really all about ear training. I have an interesting short story, if I may.
yeah.
When I was a student at Berklee, I used to play at Wally's with the great Jason Palmer. And I remember one time we playing one of his tune, kind of like involved piece that you can totally hear. And I remember the great Miguel Zenon, I don't know if you know who he is, came in, heard the tune, and sat in and played, the heck out of it, if I may. And I said, oh, of course you can do that. Because you can hear the harmony if you listen to it, the tune. I mean, the trumpet player Jason took maybe 50 chords. I took 70. And at the end of the day, you should be able to hear just about any tune because the cycle repeats. It's whether it's 57 bar, 100 bar. It's just okay, minor, major, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. So that's one of my goals as, an educator is to kind of get my students to hear and voice leading, very important.
Yeah, so
Hear,
this is fascinating to me because what you're, in terms of solfege and how you're using it, and you're having your students, you're having your students sing, right? You're having them sing the solfege and all that kind of stuff, or even if they're not doing solfege, maybe just nonsense
yeah,
syllables or something.
just exactly nonsense syllables. Maybe I should bring that. It's my first year. As I maybe by year 2, I will have them singing solfege because well, to each their own. I know a lot of great players. The other thing is I also don't want to bring. I know everyone have their own musical upbringing. There's certain things that work for them, and there's certain answers and conclusions that they figured out on their own. So perhaps I don't want to take that away. So that's why I think I just resort to just singing, whatever nonsense syllable. But to be able to do that will absolutely enhance the ear. Because when we talk about improvisation, that's really what it is. Like, what can you hear from what you've been practicing, from the transcriptions that you did of all the legends? How much of it have you retained? How much of it can you hear? And how much of it can you apply over these given chord changes? So at the end of the day, it's about how much you can hear.
That was going to be my next question, or at least one of my questions to you. So yeah, no, this is great. This is a great lead into this. So I'm curious. Okay, we've talked about the solfege, and you really like put it, gift wrapped it in terms of like improvisation. What really, what's really happening there. But how does one transition from do re mi fa sol la si do to like hearing chords and stuff like that? Like, what was your process when you were growing up and stuff? What did your dad do with you? What did how did you get that transition from single notes to chords to learning harmony and
Chords.
stuff?
Yeah, I think with chords, it was kind of like the same thing, hearing the different notes, like, da, de, ah, he, and that'll be like some kind of truncation of 1, 2, 5, 7, or da, ya, ha. Like when I hear, being able to hear, like when someone's like, da, da, you know, da, oh, like I can hear the single notes, like, so then I would you.
That's
That's how I
awesome.
would go about it. So again, yeah, I'm a big ear, God. So that's why when I was in college, it was, my thing was to understand what I'm doing now, because I was kind of a lot like all ears, like, oh, I can hear just about anything. And I didn't know whether it's minor or major. I'm like, oh, that sound. Yeah, sure. I can improvise off that sound. So then that's what I had to learn over the years. And it came together. Now that I've been, teaching for, I guess, 8 weeks now, I realized, wow. So my upbringing was really cool. And I don't want to take anything from it. So which is why I feel like I don't want to necessarily completely change how a lot of those students think, because I'm glad my professors, I mean, I'm sure they did, but I just didn't listen or something, because I think my method really worked in terms of, it's first hear it. Don't worry about what it is, minor. You don't need that. Later on, learn that so that you can pass it on. Notice I didn't use the word teach, but pass it on to your friends, to the world, become a humanitarian and share it. And I feel like that's where I'm at now. Like I understand both sides, the academic side in terms of like, oh, this is a minor 7 or 2 or 5 or whatever. And I can also completely hear it too. And I can tell the students that are hearing it, they have no idea what it's called, but they have to, I think that's a plus. And for me growing up, it was the other way around, was being pushed when I was like in high school, hearing everything. So it's like, oh, but you don't know that this is a diminished chord. But it didn't matter. I can play it. I mean, now, of course, I know in college, that's what I've focused on. Like, okay, what is this? What am I playing? What is, and then I can explain it. But I feel like I was discouraged to hear it. Oh man, you solo. What are you playing on in the urge? I don't know. I heard some kind of, I mean, now we know it's like, Lydian, but back then it's like, oh, I just heard da ba da 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 da, like, using my ears too. Giant steps, great. What is that? I don't know. What? I just hear the chords. So
Awesome.
that's that's my upbringing. And now I see it comes full force. It's so important. Really, that's what separates, I feel like, the cats, as we say, from the others. People that can really hear a lot. And I was really impressed. Again, I always go back to that story to see that Miguel Zenon was able to do that. And I feel like, yeah, I'm sure that had to do with his upbringing in Puerto Rico. Maybe that's something we need to bring back here. I know a lot of the masters did that, but maybe in school that's been discouraged. Like, go ahead, son. Go hear the harmony first, and you have time to figure out what it is.
Yes.
And
Oh my gosh. No, this is I'm going to just interject for a second. Absolutely. I wish I was trained that way. I mean, most of us in schools in the States were taught to read and play at the same time. We're taught to
right,
label, not
right, right.
necessarily label it yet, but not to use the ears as much. And I was talking with Alexa about this on the
Mm-hmm.
show, and even Lauren to a certain extent. And there's something called music learning theory, which I'm certified in, and it's Edwin Gordon, Dr. Edwin Gordon. He passed a few years ago, but he founded that, and he was a jazz bassist, and so he said the way that we learn is by hearing. We hear it, so it's sound before sight, and
Absolutely.
so he did extensive research into how children learn music, and he formulated theories, concepts, and methods for teaching for that. And being a jazz bassist, obviously, I mean, he got the picture. But what's really cool, you used your ears first, and then, using them for many years, then you labeled it. It's like when your parents read your books when you were younger, you just heard it over and over again. Eventually you spoke, and then eventually you spoke more complete thoughts, and then more complete thoughts and more phrases and all that kind of stuff. And then in school, then you labeled it. It's the
You
same
label
thing.
exactly, absolutely, absolutely. Wow, that's a wonderful way of putting it. I have to borrow that. I'm gonna listen to the interview, borrow that from you. Ear training. Oh, it's a perfect way of putting it. Yeah, I absolutely agree, and that's been what I've been resorting to. So then I went through a long period. I would say like 10 years of doing like the so so then in my development, I would say in college, I was that was I guess I was in the great Hal Crook. I was in his ensemble, and I would say that I was maybe the weakest player in that group in terms of like chord change reading because it was different. How whole thing is beyond at the time, at least it was beyond time and changes. Like these are the changes, and I want you to create art. And I wasn't quite my limited bebop ears, and you know,
Okay.
and I don't know if I can kind of hear those kind of harmony. And so then I went through a thing which at the end of the day, end up messing me up. So every day I put, I would just read tunes, read changes, and have developed a method on how to read chord changes, like what all the symbols mean to me in concert. As a result, I cannot read changes in my key.
Okay, can you expand upon that? So, for example, I guess if we have a lead sheet and it's concert, right? C instruments, that's the way you
Perfect.
read it?
Yeah, if it's an E flat, I automatically start transposing. It became a visual thing, like of connecting. So in essence, I learned how to kind of like voice lead changes, like just make it work, voice lead everything. No matter how, if it's not diatonic to the key or whatever, just I can create, so then it took me, I would say a year of doing this until I reached that goal. So thanks to Hal for like pushing me to that. And then I wish I was in Hal's ensemble now. I mean, I would just really finally play what he wants, is create art out of art rather out of chord changes. So I did that for like 3 years of looking at chord changes. Okay, D minor. For me, I'm automatically thinking B minor
Okay.
to diminish. Like it became super academic like that. And the goal for me was to like voice lead it, find common tones that work over the whole tune, a la masters of that. I would say from like the younger generation, from your generation, the youthful. Like for people like, for instance, like what Kurt Rosenwinkel and Mark Turner had going on sonically, where I would say like they're a genre was sort of like exploring voice leading. They would take a sound and play all the different harmony out of it, all the different juices I refer to it as. And so I was kind of doing things like that, not necessarily in their language, but sort of like for me to master reading changes. And yeah, I got to a point where I would go to a gig and people were like, oh, here's the changes, whatever combination I can kind of like connect it together. And then over the years, it became like it went back to hearing, which is such an amazing thing, like, oh, okay, they did write D minor 9, but the pianist is really playing 13, that kind of thing. So it's back to this. And I'll rechange it and say, well, it's not really what they. So I'm able to do after all these years to balance it back to the hearing, because a lot of times you'll have different piano players who play D minor 9 a different way. Some people will add something to it. So a lot of time it'll be more clustered. There'll be some kind of 13 something, and so now I can balance both, which is another thing I encourage too for my students to kind of learn how to read changes. I feel like a lot of people have issues with reading changes. If you put something that's not just D minor, G7, C major, if it's D minor, then, A flat altered, B flat altered, B major, C minor, like kind of like that. And it's kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can hear it, but you can common sound, there's common tones, and kind of execute your way through that. Yeah.
Okay, so to recap what you're saying right here, because this is really cool. So, we have our jazz standards, and a lot of the jazz standards 2-5-1s, for the most part. But
Right.
the music of, I don't even want to just say today. It's beyond just today. It's even further than that. It's not the 2-5-1s necessarily. It's going to be those changes, those different types of changes, a D minor to A flat altered to B flat or whatever, and just trying to learn how to work through those types of changes, thinking about voice leading, thinking about common tones, notes that are close
Right.
together, really
Right.
studying the music, but also
Right.
not just visually studying it. It's also hearing the changes.
Exactly. Right. Right. So it's like both happening at the same time. So when I'm playing and when I'm reading changes, it's two different kind of things now. When I'm reading changes, I feel like there's so much going on. Like I'm visually looking at it and analyzing and thinking of all the things that I've worked on and ways of looking at the changes and ways of, I don't know, creating story, tension, and release on the cycle. And as opposed to when I'm hearing it, then I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going for a mood and atmosphere. I'm going for, I don't know, like a journey, and then coming back to the harmony. Given that the rhythm section or wherever I'm playing with, trust me, that I can completely leave and go back, create humor, all those kind of things. That's what I'm thinking of. So I think improvisation is such an amazing thing in itself. Someone should write some kind of, there's a lot more dissertations to be written or a lot more analysis on the art of improvisation, creating it to culture and everyday life and humanity. I really think it's all in there. It's such, I mean, when I think of improvisation, I'm always thinking of like, wow, I get to do this again. It's interesting. Like I get to, maybe I'm overanalyzing it. I'm looking at it from an analytical standpoint, but that's how I look and think of improvisation. Like, wow, I really get to express and create things, whether it's like humor and my personality, my thing. Of course, paying homage sometimes whenever I choose to the masters that came before, and sometimes completely taking their sound, whether it's like bebop or something, and exploring that sound. Like, oh yeah, let me just twist bebop's arm today. on all the things you are again. You know, and yeah, so it's really it's an amazing art form. Improvisation is an art form.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
talking about you're talking about telling stories, and actually, you're the first person that ever mentioned like, maybe I'll inject humor here, or and think about culture here, or something like that. And that's so interesting that you said it
That
that way.
yeah, that's exactly how I think about it. I think about improvisation. Oh, maybe I'll be a drummer now and steal some of that bass player. I like what bass players do. Oh, this is more like piano player. Oh, this is more like New York. This is what we're doing in New York. Like, like, that would be the humor. This is this culture. Or, oh, this is Charlie Parker. My interpretation of Charlie Parker. This is Sonny Rollins. This is Herbie Hancock. Oh, Monk. Wait, Monk. So, I'm thinking all those things, a lot of times improvising.
Now, when you say you're thinking all these things, well, actually, I have to do a side note. So, if you're thinking New York, it should be and you just all 16th and 32nd notes because everything has to be done yesterday.
Right, exactly. Or what certain people play in New York. There was in there in New York where there was a lot of like sustained notes a few years ago, like that. But if I okay, let me see. Da ba da dee dee right. If you said ba ba da 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 dee da da be da da dee da be dee be da ba dee be dee da ba da ba da ba dee ba dee ba da ba da ba da dee ba da be dee da da. That's sustained. That came from some of our great piano players. That sustained note. Da bo dee be dee da bo do do be dee da do bo do bo da ba dee da do 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 be dee do dee da be da 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 da. Those kind of things. And he can improvise on that. And some people might find it, wait, is he mocking that sound or is he? Yeah, I've been that player. I remember another Wally story. There was well, he might shun me if he hears this, but it's a great story. And we used to have this guy, I don't remember his name, but he would come and he was a great saxophone player, but coming from the smooth jazz kind of sound. So it would be like, we'll play Moments Notice, and he'll kind of play with that. And I was like, this is great. I can do it too. So I would take a whole solo playing whatever, but using that kind of like down. And people will be like, oh my God, stop mocking him. It's not like, but this is so cool what he's doing. Sure, there's elements of mockery, but I really think it's an art because we're all here trying to play Train, Bird, whatever, Post Bob, Sunny, but this guy's bringing a whole other kind of like sound over it. But I think a lot of people thought I was mocking him, but it was more like, man, let me see if I can actually do it the right way or something, or whatever the right way to me means, which is like a mixture of like mixing it all and using those kind of R&B. People call it smooth, but it's really R&B. Maybe that's why there's such disdain, for that genre. It's R&B sax playing, which is an amazing thing, and a lot of people can't do that. So yeah, so I think yeah.
I never heard anybody say it that way before. When you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
that's really interesting. And when my thought in my head was like, I wasn't thinking you were mocking him. I was more thinking like you're carrying on the conversation.
Aha! Great. Should have been there, Donna. Exactly. Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. But there were elements of kind of mocking it too, but it was mocking because those people didn't think that was cool, the other musicians. But to me, it was like, man, this is brilliant. I love that sound. I grew up with that sound. I grew up in church, playing in church. And to be able to play a tune like Moments Notice and that idiom is amazing. I
It's
think there's
different.
a out of DC with man, who was in that band? Some of the younger cats in DC. Names are not coming to me, but they were playing tunes like Chick Corea tunes with kind of like a groove. Tim Green was part of it. Cremon Fowler. There's a band they put together a few years ago where they played kind of like a groovier version of uh, Humpty Dumpty uh, by the great not Ornette's Humpty Dumpty, but Chick Corea's Humpty Dumpty, and that was like amazing where they play kind of that. But of course, those guys are like great improvisers, and it reminded me of that. It's its own thing. When you change the groove to a lot of the jazz, it's another thing, and to be able to play it in that lane, just like it's just the same way where we see a lot of guys play standards freer. You take all the things you are, something, and you kind of open it up, a la, and you, okay, go, great, play that. If I give Tony Malaby, who's a who's a colleague here, if I say, okay, here's a trio, play all the things you are, I'm sure he's gonna, it's gonna be some of the hippest thing I've ever heard. That's not gonna sound like, the jazz. So then what's wrong with, the groove guys putting that into their context? You know what I'm saying? So this is kind of more where I would say I was coming from with that.
Wow, it's mixing genres in a sense.
Really mixing genres, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so interesting. And you got to. I mean, the thing though, the premise behind that is you need to learn the tune the way people have done it first, obviously.
Absolutely, right, exactly. And then the intent of the composer, and then from there you can take it to your own thing. Absolutely.
And when you're, I want to trace back to something you were saying when you're improvising. Let's say I don't even want to use it. No, I will do it in two ways. You have like, let's say a jazz standard, right? I don't know. Let's say all the things you are. That's the first thing that popped in my head. Okay, you know the tune, but let's say it's the first time you're looking at it or whatever. You're studying, you're looking for voice leading opportunities, all that kind of thing. You're doing your your analysis with, the chord changes. You're hearing them. I've got a piano right here. That's why I'm going over here. But you're hearing the chords, all that kind of stuff, listening for the voice leading opportunities and stuff like that. And you're working it through, right? But when you're on stage, you're thinking about. I just want to make sure I've got this. When you're on stage, as a recap, you're thinking about maybe I'll do a certain mood over this. Maybe I'm kind of feeling a little down. Maybe I'll put a little dark mood on this. But what? Maybe I'm kind of down. I need to feel better. You know what? Let me make the second chorus more humorous. Like, are you thinking that way? Or are you thinking, or is the voice leading has been worked out? It's just internalized in a sense. It's going to kind of come out.
Yeah. So I'm really close to what you're saying, but it's really like I'm thinking in the present, like, okay, this is the kind of piano player I'm working with, or the drummer. I don't know. So I need to either like let someone lead, or I need to really lead this. Or, okay, so it's more like really like improvising. I'll get to the bandstand and feel like, okay, we're kind of too comfortable. Let's push this. Or we are, okay, this is lacking. So I really, really need to hold on to the band. Or we're playing to please, or we're playing for the musicians. It's kind of creating tension. Maybe here's the word. I'm instigating, kind of like, okay, we're in the present. This is the reality of what's going on. But what about my reality? This is how I feel today. Let's go there. Or other times it's like, okay, fine. We're going to be sad today. Let's be sad together. That's really, that's how I would describe it in the moment. And sometimes you feel like, I don't want to be a hero today. I'm not going to save the band. We sound sad. We're going to sound sad together. I might snap out of it. I'm always like pushing myself that way. Like, okay, we have 3 more tunes to go. I need to do something. I need to elevate. So I'm always like talking, but that's why I say it's an art form. To improvise is an art form. We don't talk about it often, but I think it truly is. We know we're going to improvise on this tune. And sometimes, I might come to the gig feeling a certain way, like, man, I have so much to say, but then the reality is everyone else is sad. Okay, well, I guess, let me see. Do I try to elevate everyone, or is it, I just play the gig for what it is. Kind of like in real life, if we walk into the room, you're happy, man. I paid, yes, and everyone's like, man, we're sad. Our friend just got into a car accident. Do you like start telling jokes like, hey guys, you know what? It's okay because I'm taking all of you out. We're gonna have a good time. I think all of those things to me, I translate all of that to the bandstand. Or you walk in, oh wow, I'm sorry guys. Okay, what are we doing? Are we gonna hold hands and sing a song for the accident to be better? Or you don't know. Or am I gonna be mean like, okay, so life goes on. These are all abilities, and that happens on the bandstand. Just we don't talk about it and we never look at it from that standpoint.
No, but it's happening on a subconscious level. You're reading each other. You're reading the room. You're also reading your bandmates.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Now, someone would ask, okay, hold on. He mentioned like leading the band. Well, yeah, I mean the saxophone player, they play the melody, they play solos, but the rhythm section is the one that's driving the band. What is he talking about? Can you expand upon that?
Right. So then, yes, the rhythm section is driving the band, but I think as soloists, you can absolutely change that energy depending on how you're soloing. People will be like, oh, that's how he's playing. So I see. For instance, sometimes I allow my students to bring a group and we play as a group. And I can tell, like I've done it. Like for example, I did this yesterday. They were playing a certain way. I said, okay, once I start soloing an equinox, the bass player is gonna change their way he's playing. The drummer is gonna start playing different, and the piano is gonna start copying different. Because they're gonna be like, oh, we want to please him, or we respect him. We're gonna see, or are they gonna try to kind of read? Like think they figure a lot of times when we improvise, we're trying to, oh, I figured out his thing. Oh, so he's playing more out. So we just need to play more out. And then the next year's like, no, that's not what. Now we're gonna play strict bebop, Charlie Parker. Wait, so now he's playing. Well, I think, he can. Sure, the rhythm section drives the band, but you can definitely create havoc. You can create tension. Like, what looking for, or what is it? Oh, so he's kind of doing it all. He's listening to my bass notes. He's interacting with that. Some people might not care for it. Like, oh, whatever. This is what I know. Bud Powell is what I know. This is what I learned. This is what I know. Fine. I'm gonna play that against his thing. But others will listen and kind of like, okay, I need to play more like this. That's why he's playing the rhythms he's playing. That's what. So yeah, as an improviser, I really think that they do have say so as well. But however, I agree that the rhythm section, they are the drive. They're the one that if, for instance, if a bass player said, listen, this gig is gonna be sad, that's it. It's gonna be sad. I mean, unless you're like, listen, just drop out,
Yeah,
Yes.
it's interesting that you're talking about all the interaction, and I'm thinking about like some of the questions the listeners may have, like, but wait, when I go to like a jam session or something like that, I mean, we're not reading each other in that way, people, and it depends also, the levels that you're playing at and stuff like that, and obviously when you're very accomplished like yourself and the people that you perform with, you have this mastery over the songs, over, voice leading and how to analyze. And so you can go to that level where you can really play around with it and create another level of tension, which would be tension between you and the band. That's pretty cool, actually. But people that are maybe, I don't even want to say just starting out, but people that could be in their own, quartets and stuff like that, or could be going to jam sessions. A lot of times the mood may be people are just so into playing their own stuff, their own instruments, they're not really listening to each other. Like, and you may see that with your students. How would you address that? Have you gone through that also?
Yeah, I think that those are just other possibilities, and I think it's totally fine for the player to be like, okay, well, I'm going there to chat. All right, well, it's life. Again, remember, I'm one that believe my musical philosophy is that everything mirrors life. Just like in life, we have all sorts of different people. Some people are rude or nice. Like, okay, well, sure, you may exist. You just have to deal with those consequences. So the saxophone player, I use saxophone because, we're known to go to these sessions and play 17,000 courses. That's fine. My goal is not to listen. Hey, people, just like life, someone will check you and say no. And hey, that's what happens. But I believe in, maybe that's the American side of me. Hey, enjoy your liberty. However, personally, when I'm in jam sessions, my thinking is, in one course, usually one or two course, I'm just going to create a possibility. So we're playing Solar. Here's a possibility that can happen in Solar in one chorus. Whether I choose to be super inside or play something completely different, play more rhythmic, it's like, these are possibilities that can happen. Or sometimes I remember I went to a jam session in the Ukraine and the Dnipro. That's probably the longest I've ever played in a jam session. A few years ago, I was invited me to come out, and I went to a jam session, and I said, well, I guess they really want me to play. So if I play two chords, then it's kind of vibing everyone. And so then I did that and like maybe 100 chords to show them like, okay, these are the possibilities. And I'm not thinking of any of you necessarily or to please you. There's different messages. Sometimes you want people to know. I know there's always this argument of like, well, do we please musicians or not? Or these are all possibilities, So sometimes, specifically for that jam session, I felt like they were looking to like please me or something, which is normal. But for me, it was sort of like, just play. And I showed that through my 70 chords. Is like, I'm just playing. Try that too. And I saw the mood of the session play when people come, they try to play something else or like, oh, I see. So he's doing this. Let me try to mimic that. You have a lot of that. I encountered the same thing in Nigeria too. I was out there and I can tell this was for like saxophone players. There's a big saxophone scene out there that I feel like the world is not aware of. And personally, I've always wanted to choose the unsearched, unexplored routes. So that's why I spend a lot of time in the places I do. And so this was like this is all the top saxophone teachers. And I can tell they're all listening, like, what is he going to do? We need to do that. I said, oh, I'm just going to do that. Like, so there's different ways that through improvisation, we can share messages and things like that. Yeah.
I'm curious. You mentioned, that you felt in the Ukraine jam session, especially that the musicians were trying to please you, and it just made me think of a question that people may have, or that a concern, issue, whatever. But people are always worried, when they whether they're at a jam session or a gig or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
a jam session or a gig or whatever. They're worried about what the other musicians think of their playing or think of them.
Right.
And, that that's like top of mind. And
Mm-hmm.
how would you address that? Someone who's, has some experience improvising or whatever, but they're worried about that. Well, what would you say to that person?
I would say, I think at the end of the day, we can't really please anyone. You can only do your best, try your best. So whether you choose to kind of like explore, that's fine. And whether you choose to, I guess, more of the kind of like, oh, I'm going to please these guys because I want to be in the band. So what I'm saying in essence is I understand both sides. Those that choose to please, that's fine. You want to get the gig, that's the route. It's just, you do whatever you want. However, there are consequences for things that we choose, so it's like you go that route, that's totally fine, or you go the other route. But I think that at the end of the day, we really need to, whoever feels like that needs to think, okay, this is my personal experience. It's okay to be where you are. I think that's what's not stressed. Like, I think there's this push, we all have to be great and monsters, have amazing technique, but sometimes we're not there yet. So when you go to a jam session, it's okay to display where you are, who you are. That's the beauty of this, because then we have to learn something and understand and all of that. So then life natural course will occur.
All right, so you have a rich cultural history, and I'm sure that that informs your project, your album, Global. And when I listened to that, yeah, wow, that was so cool. It was so interesting. I was totally stumped about the meter signatures, which is really cool. But talk to us about that project and what spurred it.
So back and can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So back in 2010, 2009 actually, I moved to New Orleans to attend formerly known as the Thelonious Monk Institute. I guess now known as the Herbie Hancock Institute. At the time, it was in New Orleans at Loyola University, with artistic director, the great Terrence Blanchard. So during one of, I attended some kind of seminar on the history of jazz, and I think it was by Victor Gordon came down and he was talking about New Orleans culture, the history. And then I always knew this part of the history, the part that involved south of the border, Haiti. And so he mentioned how there were around uh, 30 to 60,000 people from Haiti that moved to New Orleans, added to the culture, and then that was kind of left behind. And I was stunned by that number. I mean, if you have 30,000 people move to a place, there's significant influence in that region.
Yeah.
And so that kind of like started my quest, because the very first day I moved to New Orleans, it reminded me, it was almost like a deja vu. Like, whoa, did I move back in time to the 90s, to Haiti? Because the features, the cuisine, there's a lot of similarity. Of course, that there's that colonial French influence, of course, in the culture and the music. Um, the heavy presence of Catholicism, that's another similarity. Things like voodoo culture, except for New Orleans, it's sort of like pop culture, like, oh, voodoo, yeah, that's so cool. And Haiti's like, voodoo, So, but nonetheless, that the similarities are there. So then I started kind of like connecting back to the times I went to Haiti, because I lived in Haiti for 2 years. And when I came back, I kind of like left that behind. I was Godwin Lewis.
Oh,
And
okay.
so then I said, my mother and my family, my father, they say Louis. So I should adopt that, Godwin Louis. So that was kind of like the birth of Global there, in terms of changing of the last name, that culture. And I kind of took it upon myself to continue sort of something I became interested in at Berklee during my time at Berklee, which was like ethnomusicology. And so I started doing research on jazz in its inception, tracing kind of like the contribution of the people that migrated to New Orleans, the free people of color, um, and also tracing the music that they brought with them. And I think through that quest, it led me to more. It led me to checking out different regions in like Central Africa, like the Garifuna culture, um, and also led me to coin what I call the four hubs of culture in the Americas, which to me are New Orleans, Latibonite, Haiti, that's in like the northern region, and then Santiago de Cuba, and then Salvador de Bahia. I think this is where you had large influx of people that came from, West and Central Africa, that you'll still find a lot of their cultures intact. And Santiago de Cuba and in Cuba in general, you have a lot of that Igbo and Nago. Those are all tribes in West Africa. So Igbo are a tribe in southeastern Nigeria, and the Nago people are Yoruban. So if you are Yoruban, but from the country of Benin, you're called a Nago. So it's almost like, for example, if I may use that example to clarify,
Yeah.
Mexicans in America, you give them a name. So Yoruba is the tribe of Nigeria, Western Nigeria. Um, but however, if you are a Yoruban and you're in Benin Republic, you're what's called a Nago.
Interesting. Okay.
So I spent some times all over the continent, the American continent. And like I was telling you earlier, I felt that there's this connection that we're all in denial of, whether it's in New Orleans, where people are in denial about their Haitian root or Haiti's contribution to that culture and to jazz. I mean, it's all well documented and it's there. However, like I always say, because Haiti is maybe not the coolest place on earth, to put it like that, there's kind of like, no, I mean, well, no, France. A lot of people in New Orleans would attribute their DNA to the south of France. Like you meet someone with a name like Olivo, like let's make that up. They'll be like, "Oh, my ancestors are from the southern of France." Like, okay, but your features, I can find that in Haiti, Mister or Miss Olivo. you know, so because I'm a musician, I just took that quest upon myself musically. And so what I did is compile a bunch of like fables, stories like that kind of history, and did an album out of it. And to me, global signifies the, I guess, the experience of those that went through the transatlantic journey to the Americas and dealt with a lot of unfortunate things. However, now to present, that's literally global culture. Like if you go all over the world, there's that influence from even from Africa itself. When we look at, for example, a lot of the sound of like Filakuti, a lot of that had to do with the Caribbeans, with the people from Trinidad, the Jamaicans, the English Caribbean folks that were in London that he mingled with. And we find that same sound in high life. There's that cultural sort of like sound that you find that we're born in the Americas. And we have jazz, swing, I call it the Nago rhythm. We can talk about this for hours, because I've been doing this for, I guess, the past 11 years now,
Oh, wow.
like literally traveling. And that actually led me back to Africa, to kind of like really document and pinpoint exactly where things come from. And so somehow I became some kind of like expert in terms of like tracing the different sounds we find in the Americas and the different cultural things. Um, and through that, I was able to trace my own personal DNA too to Africa. And right before the pandemic, it led me to the wonderful Central African region of the Congo. So that was quite an amazing trip. And in conclusion, I can conclude because a lot of people haven't really gone to the Congo because there's a lot of stereotypes and just negative things that we hear about that region. I can conclude that a lot of the sounds we hear here today, whether it's jazz, traditional music from Cuba, a lot of it, the majority of the influence come from the Congo. There's a lot of, I mean, a lot of that duple meter sound that we hear, and the American continent comes from there.
I'm surprised a duple meter would come from Congo. I thought that was like purely American. Like I'm thinking that, definitely a lot of like mixed meter, complex rhythms, complex meters would come, from the African countries and Haiti.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the duple meters. So, okay, so we're gonna go to the technical stuff. So, when we think of Africa, right, West and Central, the unique thing that the Haitians were able to do and trace is separate the continent into two, meaning that we have Congo, right? Congo would refer to present day, I guess, southern Nigeria, all the way down to Angola. That's Congo culture, and you find a lot of duple meter, specifically what's called the Congo rhythm, which is this.
That's cutting out a little bit. Can you
So like dang 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 dang. Ding, 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 ding. That's very Congo. I heard it there. A lot of the videos that I took there included different versions of that, and I went to the place on the river where that rhythm was said to have been born, and heard some troops perform a lot of the different variation of the Congo rhythm. And then when we looked at West Africa, we refer to it as Guinea, right? So it's like Congo and Guinea. Guinea would be like modern day Senegal, all the way to Nigeria. And that's where you find a lot of the triple meter things that we hear. And a lot of it specifically is coming out of like Yoruban, Dahomey, Ewe culture, which are modern day Togo, Benin, and Nigeria, which is the famous Dahomey gang 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 gang. And through Haiti, we can actually trace their ancestry, given the history of Haiti and how they were able to free themselves in 1804. So therefore, you're able kind of to trace the connection between the continent of Africa and the New World, because in Haiti it's all divided into rhythm. For example, what I mentioned, Nago. Growing up, I always knew Nago to be a rhythm in Haiti, and in my travels, I found out, oh, Nago is actually a tribe in Africa. It's people, it's and so like there's a bunch. There's the Congo rhythm. There's a variation on the Congo rhythm, which was born in Haiti called the Pitois, and it's kind of like Haiti's national rhythm. Then we have a lot of, then because of colonialism, a lot of the rhythms are like cross-cultured also. There's a rhythm referred to as Raga, which comes from Benin. It's short for Alada, which is kind of like the birthplace of one of the Haitian heroes, Toussaint Louverture, who's one of the legends that's responsible for freeing, the Haitian people. And so that rhythm is referred to as Lala, and it's a duple meter. However, as I mentioned, when we go to Alada, it's a lot of triple meter today when we hear that sound. So I think a lot of it has been cross culture. When you take an island like Haiti, where the majority of the people there were actually come from Congo, specifically at the turn of at the end of the 1700s, going into the 19th century, the 1800s, the majority of the people in Haiti, about 46% would have been from the Congo. So I think a lot of them were, because of, I guess a lot of them had to kind of upkeep some of that Benin culture. So maybe that's why we have a lot of those cross culture and rhythm, like, because a lot of the rhythm will be like a West African name, but it'll be duple meter. Those are all researches that can be done. I'm giving the hand out to someone that's, all the ethnomusicologists. But it's, to me, it was fascinating how much unaware we are of all these things, which are like essential components of jazz history, American history. I think we look at it more regional, like, no, we're Americans. We went through our own struggle here. We're unique. You don't know what I went through. And then everyone else kind of like do the same. Well, you don't know what we went through in Jamaica. We are unique because we're, and then it's all the cultures kind of intermingle. And so this is kind of like the birth of my global project, to kind of showcase that all of those stories, the fables, the legends, the myth, and so on, are now global culture. We find it all over the world. It's sort of like what's cool about music, from popular music to even to classical music. A lot of classical there's that American, and I mean continental American influence in music and culture today. And so this is what I wanted to show. So, so some of the fables, I guess, for example, there's a tune I wrote, and I featured the amazing legend Xiomala Laugard, Cuban singer. Her son, the great Axel Tosca Laugard, is also featured on the album. And this tune is called Presente, where it talks about, so it's kind of like a love story about that you would find in Cuba. A lot of that culture, a lot of, Latin American culture have these love songs where it's like, I'm here for your love forever to stay. When you listen to a lot of those famous boleros, it has that kind of cultural thing, which is a global thing. I mean, I think you find a lot of that element in pop across the world. This notion of love songs and the exploration of it was very present in Latin America in the 20th century.
Do you find that this is really, there's a lot of stuff I honestly didn't know about, and Antonio Hart taught jazz history way back, and it was really good actually. But you're diving a little bit deeper into some of these I can't even pronounce some of these things, the tribes and everything. That's so interesting. But do you find that, okay, with the mixing of cultures, that everything is so mixed together, almost to the point where you may not be able to distinguish where things come from? Are we at that point?
Not quite, because a lot of the sounds it's getting there. I mean, yes and no, because we can say yes in terms of like, a lot of us in the Americas don't really know our background, our DNA. So then we can say from that standpoint. But at the same time, with a little research, we can kind of like, you look, and it's the same thing musically, like, this sounds come from blah, blah, blah. That sound, it comes from here and there. And we know specifically in jazz, especially when we take the sound of Elvin Jones, is actually the perfect marriage between West and Central Africa, because we have the marriage of the 4 and the 3, the duple meter, that one, two, three, four, five, six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, thank God, 2, 3, gang, gang, gang. Can't you see? So it's kind of like it brings both cultures together when I listen to the great Elvin Jones. Um, so we can trace that aspect of it. You see what I'm saying? A lot. I think pretty much if we can, all we have to do is kind of be interested in it to find some of those sounds. Even from the blues, a lot of its modern context, whether we're talking about Piedmont or Delta blues, I find a lot of um, connections between modern day like Sierra Leone, Liberia, Mali, a lot of Manding culture. That legend sound do be da 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 be do be da da di do, because a lot of that Piedmont blues has that descending motion, like da da di do. It's very Lydian. If you ever check out some of that Carolinas blues, da da di do, and then we know, of course, historically that a lot of people were shipped from that region to the Carolinas. And then you see it modern day if you're in South Carolina and you go to modern day Senegal, Guinea, Sierra Leone, you see that connection. And then with the notion of grits and the cuisine, you see that connection. And we know that there's a large, in the African American community, there's a lot of people tracing their DNA and it's leading them to those regions.
Yeah. Wow. I, I'm curious. Did you when you went to New Orleans, but
Mm-hmm.
also when you went to Africa, were you able to get in touch with any relatives?
No, not that. I'm not at that point yet. I feel like I was close in terms of the Congo because I would say a lot, around 48, 49%, almost half of my DNA is from the Congo, from Bakongo culture.
Wow.
And because Haiti is so unique, I can trace it to 4 villages. That's where I am at because the town that my mother is from in Haiti, um, also have a similar name to a region and the Bakongo region. That's
Wow.
the thing about Haiti. So, because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to visit that region, but I was able to, like, I had the ship records. I mean, just extensive research, and I can pinpoint to about 4 villages that a lot of people were coming from, and through the Congo River, and yeah, so I just have to kind of like visit that region and figure it out. Also, um, visit those specific villages and take it from there. Yeah,
This is blowing my mind. Sure, obviously it's blowing yours,
it,
but it's blowing mine.
yeah, it blew my mind. There's
That is so
so much
cool.
work to be done, and I think that I know a lot of people don't care for identity. Maybe that, like I said, maybe that's the like ethnomusicologist side of me, and I've took it upon myself to like continue to explore. And now the second part of Global, which I'm recording very soon, was supposed to center around the Congo because they were the first ones to come to the New World and also the last ones too. They're for the first ones to come and the last ones to. Uh, but back in the continent, I had an ambassador. Like when I went to get my visa to go to Congo Brazzaville, um, the ambassador ended up giving me the visa for free. She was just like amazed that that I was from Haiti, and she, based on her personal experience and her family, she was telling me that like her family were some of the first people to leave for the Americas, and then also the last ones also to go, the first and last ones. And so she was kind of amazed, and she said, "You know what? Here's this visa. If you need anything, just call me while you're there, and I will connect you with someone." I didn't end up doing that because in my research, when you do that, you end up being stuck. Because if I want to go to like a funky place, they'd be like, "No, why would you want to go there? No, don't go to that side of town." And that's actually a joy for me, like to that edge, that side of town that people are like, "Oh, something bad might happen." Still
Wow.
here, tell about it. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my head, when the pandemic is, finally, I don't know if it'll ever be, as a pandemic, it'll be over. I mean, this will be with us for a while, but
right,
I'm curious if you're going to form some kind of, go back and I don't want to say the word alliance, but, perhaps go back and teach or get, more inspiration and bring that back and teach that at Berklee.
yeah, I've been doing that. I've actually right now I've been spending a lot of time. So during the pandemic, I spent majority of the pandemic in Africa actually. So
Wow.
November around the election, I went to Africa for 6 weeks from November 1st, actually. So exactly a year ago until about December 6th. And then I went again for New Year's. So like December 27th or so to East Africa until February 5th. And then I went again to March and took my mother there. My brother and I, we took our mother for the first time to Africa. So I was there for another 5 weeks, I think March till May 1st. And then I went again in August. And then I went again. I just got back 2 days ago. I was there when you actually reached out to me.
Yeah.
And my goal is to kind of like create a bridge between Africa and here. And I mean a real bridge where it's not one-sided, because it's been one-sided. We go there and do research, and all these talented, amazing musicians don't get to come here. For example, there's an amazing jazz scene in Ghana right now, in Accra, Ghana. You have Maestro Bernard Aissa, an amazing composer and saxophonist. You have the great Victor Day, amazing pianist, amazing composer as well. There's Bright Osei. There's an amazing singer, Sandra Yusa. Yeah, there's a whole crew, of musicians
Wow. Wow.
over there that they should be touring here. We need to hear some of that sound. There's another amazing group in Togo that I've been working with those young musicians. The band is called Dekako. And it's one of my great friends, Philippe, also known as Aklama, also known as Komla. He has a lot of different names, so a lot of musicians. So they're out of Togo. So what this guy did, Philippe, he created a percussion instrument from, I guess, native Togo, and kind of like started mixing all of them together, all the different drums that you find in different tribes and different regions, and he created his own unique instrument.
Wow.
And they're a jazz band. They've been working, doing standards like their own way, and yeah, so it's kind of really cool.
That is awesome. Oh my gosh. And I'm just actually writing down some notes here too. Some people I think will be good connections for you. When we're done, I'm gonna talk
Oh,
about
great.
that. I'm
Absolutely.
just thinking about somebody that I interviewed for the podcast, which will be awesome. But
Mhm.
listen, you've been so incredibly gracious with your time. I mean, truly, and this has really been very fascinating. And I'm so glad that you actually mentioned your next project, because that was going to be the next thing that I was going to
Right.
ask you. And I want to definitely encourage everybody to listen to Global. It's really, I think it's fascinating. I think it's so cool.
Thank you. That really means a lot, Donna. Really, I'm working on two projects right now. So there's Global 2, which continues the story, but Global 2 will focus more on my experience rather than the experience and kind of like ethnomusicology. This Global 2 will kind of focus on my personal experience, traveling. So it'll be a little more personal. And then the next project that I've been working with the great Aaron Goldberg on piano, Pauline Shaw on voice, my colleague. We've worked a lot together, done a lot of research, always comparing notes, especially when I was doing research in Haiti. You know, I would go to the Library of Congress, and then we would meet at Pauline's place, kind of going over everything. And then from there, she's like, okay, well, it looks like you have to go to Senegal. Looks like you have to go to Paris, to the library in Paris. Looks like you have to go. Anyways, she's singing on this project, featuring the great Obed Calver on drums and Jonathan Michel on bass. And this project is named after my nonprofit organization called Experience IT. So this one is specifically on Haiti and that experience, sort of bringing awareness to Haiti, the sounds of Haiti, to the people. We premiered it at Lincoln Center Outdoors, but we did a gig recently. Shout out to Joel Chris out in Long Island for, I think it was the Hamptons Jazz Festival. And I think we want to go ahead and kind of record that project. It's very unique. So that's what's kind of happening now. So it's sort of like, do I record the Experience IT project or do I record Global 2, which doesn't deal with Haiti? Because a lot of people listen to Global and think it's about Haiti. It's not, you know, because when Haitian people listen to it, it's not Haitian enough because it's not meant to be about Haiti. It's about continental America, you know. So there's certain stories that deal with my experience. And for example, Tumaco, which is Western Colombia. There's certain things that deals with my experience dealing with Afro-Brazilians, the English Caribbean, Spanish Caribbean, French Caribbean culture, and all of it together. New Orleans, and of course the four hubs of culture, like I mentioned, Garifuna culture. So that's kind of what that dealt with. It's sort of given us like a sonic survey of the sounds of the Americas that came from West and Central Africa and how they became their own unique thing. Because in Africa, they don't quite sound like that too. During my research, a lot of the sounds of Haiti, I said, oh, for example, I visited a region in Benin called the Mahi. Remember I told you in Haiti, everything is down to rhythm. The Haitians were able to kind of like bring everything down to rhythm. That way they can, I guess, maintain their DNA. And so I played those musicians. Oh, this is what Mahi rhythm is in Haiti. And it was a lot more faster. And over there, it's in general in West Africa, it's a lot slower. So you can tell that the reason why we're thinking, that's the revolutionary side and us. Because I mean, we've had to fight a lot in this continent. But in West Africa, things are a lot slower. And I think this is where that cross-cultural Congo influence come from. I'm supposed to say in the Congo, everything is kind of, it's duple meter, but it's aggressive. I'm thinking. But in West Africa, it's boom, 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 boom. It's a lot slower than, you know, we play it here like gang 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 gang. No, it's a lot more. Once you start getting to the Zenli and they doing the movement with their shoulders, everything is a lot slower than we play them here, you know. So these are some of the amazing things that I've found in my research.
This is so cool. I could see you definitely teaching ethnomusicology.
Absolutely. You know? I feel like I'm a self-proclaimed ethnomusicologist. I've been trying my best not to. It seems like there's a lot of, how can I put it? There's a lot of false information. You know, I see like in curriculums. I will not say the schools. I checked out curriculums. Like for example, when I was preparing for my interview for Berklee, I was looking at different schools and their curriculum on African studies and tracing even some of the masters, you know, that have been doing research. I'm like, it's not accurate. Like, this book is not accurate. This is not true. How do I know that? Because I've been there. I was just there in that region. This
Yeah.
story is not true. This rhythm is not true. This is so I'm trying my best not to become that person, because a lot of the information is false, because a lot people don't go to the continent, therefore cannot, you can't just trust something you read on, in a book. In general, we know this, it's like, oh, this is the rhythm of the, but it's like, no, that's not, as it's a lot more complicated than that. There's more to that story. Or in general, I saw something that talked about, we're gonna trace the sounds of Benin and this to jazz. Like, wait a minute, this is not okay. Things like that.
Yeah, wow. And
Yeah, so
this definitely affects, I'm just thinking out loud, this definitely affects drummers for sure.
they, absolutely. And I've been drummers have been very interested in a lot of my research, and I've been sharing a lot of information with them, because essentially I wanted to kind of work on a drum book, with different rhythm. For example, when we go to Benin, there's about 500 rhythms, and it's one of the thing that I've done. I don't know if I can mention that yet. I can mention it yet, because I did all this work. Somebody will borrow my idea. But I have a great friend in Togo that kind of showed me how to go about it, putting it all together and getting all the information I want. So I'm also working on a lot of amazing things that I cannot quite talk about, because we're dealing with licensing and
Oh, okay. Okay.
that so fingers crossed that all of it goes well, and I'll make sure to keep you posted. We can talk about outside of this show. So there might be some really cool things happening with all the different projects. And to bring it all around, it all started from improvisation.
Yeah. See, and you
And,
know what? I was writing this word down before,
mhm,
storyteller. I
right.
think of storyteller because right from the
Mhm,
beginning, we were talking about like, when you improvise, like, what are you thinking about? And you're thinking about kind of stories, and moods
mhm,
and all that kind of stuff. And then as you were talking about, fables and legends, I'm like, storyteller. There it is. That's why. That is
right.
so interesting to me. Now,
Yeah.
let me ask you before I forget, how can
Mhm.
people find you online?
Yes, so I'm on Instagram, Godwin Louis, Loue. I'm also on Facebook. I realize I've been spending less time on Facebook. Sometimes I pop my face on Instagram, and I'm working on some things. That's why. So I'm kind of like studying, and I've always been that. I think it's the homeschool side of me. I was homeschooled until I think the eighth grade. So everything is always like, I always tend to like analyze things and see. And when things becomes cool, I always kind of choose, oh no, let me go here, and then so. But I am on Instagram active there. I'm on Twitter, but I haven't been there forever. But so I would say my most active platform is Instagram.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And yes, there is Facebook, and I mean that's how we connected. But
Right.
okay, so definitely Instagram. I will put those links
And
as well as your website.
yes, it's Godwin Louis Louis.com, and yeah, look out for some really, I guess, cool things to come.
Yeah, and they could listen to your
Really,
album there. They could listen to. They could
yeah, I
listen.
think I have a few tracks there. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I do have a few tracks there, but it's on all the platforms, your Spotify, Apple Music, even on YouTube. The album is on there.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and the next album, we're planning that out and try to see how we can make it current, creating the visual effects and the back scenes, kind of like creating those the visual effect rather, that people want to see. So there's a lot of cool things in store. It's just licensing. That's, you don't want to make sure you're not exploiting people's culture, or appropriating it.
Got it.
That's some of the things I went through, by the way, with Global One, where I remember one of the songs, the very first song, Nago Congo, which is like a traditional prayer from traditional prayer, Prière Guinéen. It's my interpretation of it. And I was sort of getting some black slacks from the Haitian community. For example, where the words go, they sing Au centre de mon cœur, oui. But in French, I guess the word is cœur. But maybe it's because of Creole colonialism. A lot of times when people sing in Haiti, they'll say cœur, oui, oui, like they had something, I guess, to sound more French. So people called me out on it, like, hey, this is not correct. The proper French way is cœur, if I wanted to say that, which means heart, at the center of my heart. Cœur. But and Creole, just like we find this in America, y'all, you know, that or y'all kind of became normal now. I don't think when I was in school, it was like, don't say y'all. But I think everyone is kind of aware what that means, and it's sort of normalized. Y'all. Oh, y'all, great. But before it's like, don't say that. That's not English. So I would say that with that same thing. Yeah. So, and then, and then I was also questioned, like, are you equipped to tell some of these stories? Because like I told you, in the Caribbean and a lot of those cultures, things are a lot more sacred when you're dealing with those stories, when you're telling stories about the sacred side, the traditional beliefs. People will question you, like, are you who gave you permission to tell those stories? You know, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So,
wow, this is cool. I mean, I wasn't even aware of that. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, people just listen, like, oh no, there's definitely some tension behind some of the music.
Oh my gosh, for sure. And we're not talking about improvisation tension either.
right. Exactly.
I had to throw that in. I'm sorry, but let's listen, Godwin. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and this was really fascinating. I know the listeners are going to really just like love this. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Donna, for having me, and I'll be listening. I'll be tuning in now, checking out the interviews. So thank you for doing this, and again, I know we did this in 2 parts. My apologies. It's been a long day. So
it's all good.